Hi, kids. I don't know about you, but one of the things that I have missed the most every Sabbath is children's story. So this last week when they called me and asked me if I would do children's story, I was super excited because I think it's so much fun to have children's story. So this week I'm going to tell you children's story. And I'm going to tell you a story about Mrs. White. So I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but one of the things that we know is that God has called each one of us. Did you know that you are called? And not only are you called, but God has something specific that He wants just you to do, that nobody else can do it, just you. Well, Mrs. White was called when she was pretty young. And God told her that He wanted her to deliver His messages. And, you know, in a way, we're all called to do that too. You can give messages of hope and love to people that you come in contact with to help them to get to know Jesus better. But you know what? She struggled with this calling because to her it seemed like it was impossible. And, you know, I think I know exactly how she felt. Because when I think about trying to, you know, do things like even get here in front of the camera and talk, it feels overwhelming and it feels hard and not like something I want to do really easy. And on top of just those kinds of things, she also really struggled with a lot of health issues. So she felt sick. And you know, Satan comes and he tells us that we can't do what God has asked us to do. He tells us that it's impossible. But you know what? With God, all things are possible. And we have to remember that. You know, it was a really good story today that Pastor told about the man who was paralyzed and how God told him to get up and take up his bed and walk. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Wasn't that completely impossible for him to rise up and walk? He was paralyzed. Well, on his own, it was impossible. But with God, it was completely doable, right? And so when God asks us to do things, we can know that even though they seem impossible to us, they're completely doable. So in this particular story, one time, it was actually one of the first times that Mrs. White had been asked to stand up and preach. And the problem was that she had been sick. Her lungs and her throat was sore, and she couldn't hardly talk more than just a whisper. She was just having a hard time. Well, that might not have been such a big deal now because we have wonderful microphones and, you know, all kinds of things to help people be louder. Well, back then it was a big problem because they didn't have anything like that. And in a church like this, you would have to be able to stand and speak loud and clear to where everybody all the way to the back rows could hear you. But she couldn't. Her voice was just a hoarse whisper. And so she got up and, you know, it looked impossible to her. But she said, as we should say, you know what, if God has asked me to do it, then everything else is on Him, right? And so she got up and she started speaking. And at first, indeed, her voice was very much a whisper. She was very quiet, and I'm sure everybody was thinking, oh no, because they couldn't hear her. But within just a few minutes, her voice became clear and strong, and she was able to stand up and talk to the congregation for 2 hours with a clear and strong voice. But you know what? That's not all, because as soon as she was done, her sore throat came back, and again, she wasn't able to talk above a whisper. And so I just want you guys to remember that if God has called you to do something, anything, that with Him, it's completely doable, even if it feels impossible to you. And so I just wanted to say thank you and happy Sabbath, and I hope that you enjoy having children's story back as much as I do. Happy Sabbath.